Hey there, how's it going? This is James Tripp. This is a video for James Tripp on YouTube. I want to hammer this one out as tightly and as efficiently as I can. It's looking at the two sides to NLP, the two sides to neurolinguistics, which is the term I prefer. I'm going to make another video on that. But right now I want to look at the two sides of NLP. I want to look at why there are two sides, how that came about, how they relate to each other, and also which might be the side that is of most interest to you, given what you want to bring about in terms of good things in your life. So we're going to look at these things. I'm going to be as succinct as I can in doing this. So first things first, two sides of NLP. I'm going to call these two sides adaptive neurolinguistics and generative neurolinguistics. Okay. Now, how best to introduce this? I think via referencing a conversation that I had with a very good friend of mine, probably some 15 years ago now, James Carlos from Melbourne, Australia. Now, I think it was around 2009 that I met him in London. And I remember us having a conversation in a pub where he was saying that the UK NLP culture was very different from the Australian NLP culture in a particular and specific way. What James had noted was here in the UK, there was a particular interest or focus on what you might call the change work side of NLP. That is sitting down with somebody and running various processes or using your communication skills or whatever to shift their mind so as they solve a problem or dissolve a problem. So they free themselves from a problem and new possibilities and choices unfold from that. So you can call this change work, and it can show up in a number of different contexts. It could show up in coaching, therapy, teaching, whatever. It's developmental work. It works with human beings. Now, this side of NLP for me is what I call generative neurolinguistics. Okay, and I call it generative neurolinguistics because when we're moving somebody's mind, we're doing so because we want good things to unfold from that. If we do a good job, we're not only going to change somebody's experience of themselves in their life or their conception of a problem, but difference will unfold for them in their lives. Good things start to happen that were not happening before, things that they were keeping themselves from with how their mind was locked into some kind of problem form, okay? So for me, that's change work, that's generative neurolinguistics. James pointed out this was the major interest here, apparently, in the UK, and that was a surprise to him because the main game of NLP in Australian NLP culture was what I call adaptive neurolinguistics, and this is essentially developing skills, understandings that enable you to show up in the world and create the results that you want to create in the world, bring about good outcomes in the world, in your life, okay? So that, you know, whatever that might be, maybe there's an art project you want to realize, maybe you want to get a book written, maybe there's a business you want to start, maybe you want to get better at running the business you already run, right? So you want to be better at moving minds, influencing people in that way. Now I call this adaptive neurolinguistics, okay? And I call it adaptive neurolinguistics because right at the heart of it, the engine of neurolinguistics, I've talked about this elsewhere, is the ability to pay attention to what's happening, know your outcome, and make adjustments in real time towards that outcome, okay? As Mike Tyson has said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. When you get punched in the face, you have to adapt. Okay, now life metaphorically punches us in the face or throws us curveballs, if you want a less violent metaphor. So we want to be able to go, right, what needs to change here? We need to be adept at making those changes, so not being stuck in our own minds and our own ruts, being able to free our own mind to maneuver in a different way in relation to that, and then calibrate, is this bringing me closer to my outcome or further from? I have a video on tote loops, which will talk a little bit more about this, although there's more to it than just tote loops. I'll put a link up in one of the corners here. Okay, so that's adaptive neurolinguistics. James pointed out that this was the sort of main game of Australian NLP culture, whereas it seemed that the generative neurolinguistics, the change work, was more the main game of the UK culture. Now, you watching this video may be in neither Australia or the UK, so I'd be curious, and if you want to add in the comments below, I'd love to know where in your part of the world, if you're engaged with neurolinguistics, NLP, what's the major focus, or is it something else entirely? Okay, I'd love to hear that in the comments below if you want to chuck that in there. So why are there these two sides? What is NLP about? Is it about this or is it about that? Adaptive or generative? Or if it's about both, how come it's about both? In order to understand this, we want to take a very brief look at where NLP comes from, how it came about. Now, to keep this as simple as possible, NLP comes from the activities of a group of people in Santa Cruz, California, in the 1970s. A group of people who were initially particularly interested in rock stars of change, let's say, and how they did what they did, or how they were able to bring about that change. When I say rock stars of change, there were three specific individuals that got looked at very closely. This is Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, and Milton Erickson. There's also an influence on this group from Gregory Bateson, who'd been working with the Palo Alto Mental Research Institute, the brief therapy unit there. And the brief therapy unit was very interested in not long analysis of people's pasts, but how could you get rapid change happening with people in a very solution-focused way. Okay, so another thread there ended up evolving out to become brief solution-focused therapy. So initially, there was this focus on getting change happening fast, and people who are good at getting change happening fast, and the context for that change was therapy. So, out of these three, by the way, it's interesting to note that Virginia Satir, who is a huge influence on the NLP meta model and the early thinking of NLP, was not just a one-on-one therapist who would sit down with people and help them move their minds, help an individual move their minds. Virginia Satir was a family therapist, so family systems therapist. So she would work with, yes, of course, there's individual psyches, but those individual psyches are all interacting. She's dealing with a psychosocial system and looking at the dynamics of that system and how to make changes in that system in order to bring about difference, not just for any individual, but for the whole collective. Now, this is hugely significant because really, if you think about that idea of psychosocial systems, that's just modern human life. Everything we do within the context of, as a participator in, the psychosocial systems of our lives. Do you work for a company? Do you want to set up a company? Those are psychosocial systems. Do you have a family? Do you have relationships? Those are psychosocial systems. Do you want to go buy a newspaper? Right? You go down there, you interact with other human beings, their minds. It's a psychosocial system, right? Anything we're dealing with, it's psychosocial systems. So if you look at it like that, of course, if you're making changes there, you're bringing about outcomes within these systems. This is where we start to get into the adaptive neurolinguistics, because once you take it outside the realm of therapy and you go, well, everything's a psychosocial system. These tools, these understandings that we've learned about here are relevant there, everywhere else. So initially, the focus of neurolinguistics is what I've called generative neurolinguistics, i.e. change work, moving minds, solving problems, resolving, dissolving problems, opening up new possibilities and choices. But then those understandings, those tools, the recognition that we're dealing with the same environment, a psychosocial system, becomes relevant if you're wanting to bring about outcomes in the world. You want to make difference within that psychosocial system that you participate in, okay, or set up a new psychosocial system that brings about certain results. So this is why those initial understandings spread out and became applicable to other areas. Now, as the NLP crew realized this, they started to get curious about people who were effective at bringing about differences in other areas, in sort of business and this sort of thing. And that was something they started to look at, as I understand it, towards the end of the 70s and the early 80s. But at that point, the group was dissolving and they went their separate ways, so that stuff didn't get formally modeled. But during the 1980s, there was a huge interest in how what had been learned from looking at these masters of change and looking at how that could be applied in the world of business. So that was a huge thing that happened in the 80s, and a lot more of that sort of adaptive NLP culture came to the fore right then and there. So this is why there are two sides to neurolinguistics. Now, and they're not as different as they seem. It's just the realm in which we're looking to make the change. So when people are focusing on what I call generative neurolinguistics, the realm they're looking to make the change is within usually a person's mind, so to speak, right? They're going to sit with another person and help that person move their mind so that their life changes. Now, they're participating in a broader psychosocial system of their life, but it's generative neurolinguistics because we want to help that person reorganize things up here so their experience themselves changes, so the problems they previously were caught in dissolve or resolve or are solved, and they see new possibilities and engage in new wonderful ways of being in their lives. So there's that side of it, and there's a certain set of skills there, and I often think about that as liberating minds. The side where, now by the way, that's relevant because they're becoming more adaptive. They become more adaptive in bringing about outcomes in their life. So it does relate to that adaptive NLP side as well. Now, the adaptive NLP side is similar but different. You're often looking to nudge the broader system and nudge the elements within the broader system to sort of do things in certain ways. If you're a leader, for example, you want to be able to get people on board with your vision and taking action towards the realization of your vision. Okay, that's not the same if you're sitting doing generative neurolinguistics. It's not like I have a vision for you, my client, and I want you to align with my vision, although it might be the case that some change work practitioners work that way. Okay, so for me, there's another distinction here which is worth sort of mentioning, is when I'm doing generative neurolinguistics, I'm looking to liberate people's minds. I'm looking to create more freedom and more choice for them. If I were using neurolinguistics to better manage a team to create a result, I wouldn't necessarily be always wanting to create like absolute liberation and new possibilities and have them firing off in their different directions. I'd be looking to nudge them towards the kind of engagement that I believed would be useful to realize my outcome, right? So that's less about liberating people and more about steering people. And I would recommend, if you're engaging in that side when you're looking at adaptive neurolinguistics, is do recognize that people have their own spirit, have their own minds, and recognize that it isn't necessarily an either or there. You can find ways of creating engagement with your visions that also serve people in creating good things in their own lives. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying here is adaptive neurolinguistics isn't necessarily about manipulating people in some zero-sum way. It can be still highly generative in what it creates for the individuals who are also involved in perhaps realizing a vision that you might want to be realizing. So there's those two sides. If you have an interest in neurolinguistics, I'm curious to know, what is it that you're interested in? Do you want to be able to sit down with people, help them move their minds so they can liberate themselves from problems that they may have perceived themselves to have or may have actually had, have new possibilities, new options for themselves going forward? Or are you interested in being able to bring about outcomes in the world for yourself more? Which is of greatest interest to you? I would love to know. If you want to contribute in the comments below, that would be fantastic. If you are still watching this video right now and you think, yeah, I got something from this, please do give it the thumbs up. And if you know anyone who might also benefit from this, please do share it. And if you have any questions generally about anything to do with neurolinguistics or creating good outcomes for yourself or for other people, anything like that, or getting yourself unstuck, use the comment section below. Please do ask. Okay, let's wrap here, and I look forward to when we next connect.